Hello YouTube. This will be my next installment in important tips for language learning. It's about time I got to this video. Been telling a lot of people about it and got a lot of people excited about it. This video is going to be on memory. Memory and language. And today what I'm going to talk to you about is real established psychological facts and theories based around memory, and I'm going to incorporate it using the example of language, since this is the topic. How can we best memorize and retain what we know when it comes to the languages we're learning, whether it's phrases, individual words, etc. Now, every language is different, so each individual language may require a little bit of tweaking, as you might know. So I'm just going to talk about in general for all languages, just language learning in general. How can we best memorize and retain our information? And the stuff I'm going to present to you in this video, you might go, oh duh, that's like common sense. Why didn't I think of that before? At the end of the video, you'll be like, gosh, I kind of feel dumb now. Because, I mean, really, it does seem like common sense. And you'll find out that a lot of people have probably already discovered this stuff. But here's studies that prove this stuff that I'm going to talk about here. And I'm going to talk about all the different categories and whatnot. So, there's always this debate in the language community, language learning community, I should say, especially here on YouTube, when it comes to output versus input. Output and input, which is superior, which is better, which do you like better, which do you find has the best results, input, output, in, blah, 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 blah. Okay? But me, personally, I like the middle way. I don't think you should be extreme on either side, because both sides have benefits. Both sides have, pros and cons. And I think together they balance each other out, and you get the pros of both, and they both cancel out each other's weaknesses. I think input is very, very important, because you have to get the knowledge first, and then output reinforces that knowledge. It's the anchor. And I'm going to talk to you about memory strategies. Now, there's such a thing as professional memorizers. People give seminars on how to memorize things. Some people need to be memorizers for their job and whatnot. And there are some people who just like to memorize stuff, and they're just, whiz kids, so to say. Just real smart people, and they just like to learn. The first memory strategy that I will talk about is called knowledge of results. It says, learning proceeds best when feedback or knowledge of results allows you to check your progress. Feedback can help you identify ideas that need extra practice. In addition, knowing that you have remembered or answered correctly is rewarding. A prime way to provide feedback for yourself while studying is recitation. In the case of language, we get our knowledge of results or feedback by talking to people and them understanding and responding. Right? So, for instance, I'll give you an example in my life, how, what I like to do. Whenever I meet someone from a culture that I don't know, speaks a language that I don't know, what I do is that day, that night, whatever, whether it be from YouTube or from that individual, him or herself, I will learn a few phrases or words and phrases, and I will try them out on that person and get the feedback. So, for instance, before I consciously made the decision that I am going to learn Swahili right now, I met a guy in one of my algebra classes that I had in college. His name was Samuel, and he was from Kenya. I thought, oh, that's interesting. You know, I wonder what language do they speak in Kenya. He goes, oh, we speak Swahili. So I was like, oh, I've heard of that language, and I want to learn an African language eventually. So what I did is that night, I went and I learned a few Swahili phrases, probably like 5 that night. And the next day I went and tried them out on him. And he's, oh, your pronunciation is perfect, you know. And I got that feedback, that knowledge of results. And that made me feel great. I was like, oh, this is exciting. I learned the Swahili, and I did it on my own, and I did it perfect, and he understood me, and I was happy, and it kept me motivated. And that's the beautiful thing when it comes to output. When you can go and talk to people, and they can compliment you, they can understand you, they can respond back, I mean, that feels better than anything, and that solidifies it in your mind. So that's really important. When you learn something, get your feedback. If you don't have any native speakers around you, that's what YouTube is about. That's what we do here, a lot of us, We'll upload videos speaking the language, and then we get our feedback from people who watch our videos. Our knowledge of results. So that's really important in retaining the memory. Knowing that you're correct in the memory helps you to remember it. And then there's also a thing called recitation. If you are going to remember something, eventually you will have to retrieve it. Recitation refers to summarizing aloud while you are learning. Recitation forces you to practice retrieving information. When you are reading a text, you should stop frequently and try to remember what you have just read by restating it in your own words. So I think this also, is pretty important in language learning. Especially when you get past the beginner's level into an intermediate and a advanced level. What I like to do is, like, when I'm reading a book in German, for instance, say I am reading a text out of here. I will read it, la da la da la da 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 da. After I'm done with the short story, the fairy tale, or whatever it might be, I will summarize in German in my own words what it was about. And it better solidifies the new words I learned, because now they're being connected to the summary. You understand? So it better helps you to remember the new words and the new thing you just read. So it can be pretty crucial, pretty important, the recitation. Rehearsal. The more you rehearse or mentally review information as you read, the better you will remember it. But remember that maintenance rehearsal alone is not very effective. Elaborative rehearsal, in which you look for connections to existing knowledge, is far better. Thinking about facts help link them together in memory. To learn college-level information, you must make active use of more reflective rehearsal strategies. So rehearsal, what this really is you're connecting this new information that you learned to previous knowledge that you have. So, for instance, let's say you are learning the German word improve, which is verbessern. Ich will mein Deutsch verbessern. I want to improve my German. You could link that. What's improve kind of like better? To improve is to make something better. So you could say verbessern. Besser, which means better. to improve better. You can kind of like connect those words. Say, ich werde mein Deutsch verbessern. Yeah. You could say, ich will besser Deutsch. I want better German. Yeah. You could connect those ideas, those concepts, those words, and you'll better remember the new ones. Yeah. Or, for instance, you have erschlagen, which means in German to beat to death. And then you have the word schlagen, which means to hit. So you can connect those concepts. Ich werde erschlagen. I'm going to beat to death dwarves. Okay. You could say, Ich werde Zwerge töten. Ich werde Zwerge schlagen. I'm going to kill dwarves. I'm going to hit dwarves. Okay, if you could connect that concept with erschlagen, kind of, summarize up the earlier, concepts. This has to do with the rehearsal, and it has to do with that recitation. You're going back and you're kind of getting all these ideas, these concepts that are similar in nature, and you're connecting them together. It helps to solidify this new vocabulary that you're learning. And another part of memorizing is called selection. The Dutch scholar Erasmus said that a good memory should be like a fishnet. It should keep all the big fish and let the little ones escape. So you want to focus on the important things. And when it comes to language learning, I think a real good example of this is Lao Shu's FLR system, or any of the other vocabulary systems out there, where they focus on the important words or the important grammatical structures that they think they will use the most, or they think leads to more meaning. So if you learn the basic words, then you can read definitions of other words and understand the newer words, or you'll understand a lot newer words based on the context if you know the most basic words of the language. You got to know the basic structures of how to ask questions, how to respond to commonly asked questions, like, why are you learning this language? How did you learn this language? You learn the important stuff first. Be selective with your memory, because when you learn the basic, fundamental, important stuff now, then the other stuff will easily come later. So you have to be kind of selective with your memory, because if you try to force too much yourself at once, you're not going to remember it very good. Organization is another part of language learning. Try to bring similar concepts together. That's why I think phrase books are extremely important. Like, here's a phrase book I have for Mandarin. Now, it is organized. It is split up into sections with common themes. You have social, meeting people, interests, feelings and opinions, going out, romance, beliefs and cultural differences, art, sports, outdoors. You have a social section. You have food section, eating out, self-catering, vegetarian and special meals, culinary reader. So if you try to categorize things, organize things, connect things with a similar theme, then it makes it a lot easier to remember them. And then you also have this thing called whole versus part learning. Either you learn the whole thing or you learn it in sections as you go along. Now, it depends what you're learning. If you are trying to learn a couple phrases, phrases is a whole group of words. I would take each phrase and learn each one individually, which would be the part learning. But let's say you have a vocab list of 10, maybe 20 words. Just learn them all at once, especially if they're related, organized, common theme. Just try to learn it at once in a whole. But if there's 3 common themes, try to set it up into chunks. Chunk this theme together, this theme together, this theme together. You have to make that conscious decision. Am I going to learn this whole thing at once, or I'm going to learn it into chunks? Usually it's better to learn something into chunks if it has a common theme or it's related. It's better to do it in chunks. There's also a thing called the serial position effect. And what this is if you're trying to memorize a list, typically people always remember the stuff at the beginning and the last of the list first. Especially if you're trying to learn something in order. It's always the beginning and the last parts of the list that you remember the best. So if you know that, you can consciously put more effort into learning the things in the middle of the list. That way you'll remember the whole list instead of forgetting the middle like people typically do. Let's see. Overlearning. Numerous studies have shown that memory is greatly improved when you overlearn. That is, when study is continued beyond bare mastery. After you have learned material well enough to remember it once without error, you should continue studying. Overlearning is your best insurance against going blank on a test because of being nervous. And the same thing goes with language learning. You could be put on the spot and have to speak the language, and it might make you extremely nervous, and you're going to forget stuff, and you're going to think later, oh, I should have said that. Oh, I should have said this. Oh, I remember it now. Why couldn't I remember it then? It's because you're nervous. But if you overlearn, which means you've already mastered it, but you keep learning it, even though you've already mastered it, will further, ingrain it in your mind. And then when you're nervous, it'll be way easier, to speak. When you're put on the spot. And I think this is extremely important, the next thing, and most people tend to overlook it. But I think it's highly important, especially when it comes to language learning, and especially when it comes to the point where you are like trilingual. When you already have like 3 languages, this becomes more crucial. It really does. And I think there's a lot of people in the language community right now who could greatly benefit this, who probably don't even know about it. Once I read this and learned this, I was like, duh, this has helped me out a whole bunch. It's helped me out so much, I can't even tell you. It's called spaced practice. To keep boredom and fatigue to a minimum, try alternating short study sessions with brief rest periods. This pattern, called spaced practice, is generally superior to massed practice, in which little or no rest is given between learning sessions. By improving attention and consolidation. By improving attention and consolidation, 3 20-minute study sessions can produce more learning than 1 hour of continuous study. There's an old joke that goes, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? The answer is practice, practice, practice. But a better answer would be practice, wait a while, practice, wait a while, practice. Perhaps the best way to make use of spaced practice is to schedule your time. To make an effective schedule, designate times during the week before, after, and between classes when you will study particular subjects, and treat those times as if they are classes you have to attend. So, basically what this is saying is, if you say gung-ho, oh my gosh, I am going to study this language all day long. Just all this energy, and then when you finally get to it, you're like, I'm bored with this, I want to do something else. But you kind of force yourself to do it. Being interested, keeping motivation is crucial to keeping things memorized, and to really paying attention and learning something. You gotta be motivated, you gotta have that interest. But of course, naturally, you're gonna lose interest after doing the same thing over and over. Now, me, I have like almost ADD, I think, when it comes to reading and when it comes to languages. Like, I'll read 20 books simultaneously because I go from one book, read one chapter of that, read one chapter of this book, 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 and then I'll come back to the first book and read that one again, and then I'll do the same cycle over and over, typically. And what that is it is this spaced practice. And how this ties into language, especially, like, I'll start out studying, like, Arabic. And I'll kind of get bored with Arabic, and I'll get distracted, and someone will be talking about this language, and I'll go, ooh, that sounds interesting, and then I'll spend like 20 minutes like looking up this language that I don't even intend to learn, and I'll learn a couple phrases of it, and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting, da 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 da, and I get all distracted and whatnot. Sometimes it's hard to, keep yourself on track, on focus with the language you're learning. At least I have that problem. Some other people have told me they have it too. But I think what really should take place is, let's say you already know some languages and you're trying to learn another one. In my case right now, I'm trying to learn Arabic. I already know German, some Chinese, and some Swahili. So what I like to do is I will spend 20 minutes learning Arabic. And once I feel like, kind of getting bored, then I'll switch and I'll study maybe German and reinforce some of the German I know, maybe learn some new grammar, some new vocabulary. Then I'll go back to my Arabic for 20 minutes, I'll get bored, and I'll spend 10 minutes on Chinese, refreshing my Chinese, learning some new vocabulary, whatever. Then I'll go back to Arabic for 20 minutes, then I'll spend like maybe 5 minutes on Swahili, and then I'll go back to Arabic. You gotta kind of switch around your interests, switch around your language to keep yourself on track with the Arabic. You can't just sit and expect to study for 3 hours one language. You gotta kind of mix it up a bit, so that way you're still kept interested. You understand what I mean? I think that's really crucial. And let's say if this is your first language and you're learning this language, maybe study it for 20 minutes, and when you get bored, watch a couple YouTube videos, then go back to your studying, and watch a couple YouTube videos, go back to your studying. You can't just sit there and expect to actually study for a whole hour straight. Try to split it up a little bit, because then you're going to be more attentive, you're going to be more focused, and you're going to be more interested and more motivated if you split it up into little sections. It works way better. It's done wonders for me, I think. It's really amazing once you actually try it out. The next category is sleep and memory. Yay, yay, yay. Now, how sleep and memory go together? Well, really, sleep is extremely crucial to memory. What a lot of people don't realize is while you're sleeping, your brain is extremely active. And sleep is it's just crucial to life in general. Without it, you die. But what happens when you sleep is really amazing. All the things you do, like in your daily life, like all the things you do that day, when you sleep that night, those same brain patterns get replayed over again. Have you ever had, one of those days where you're playing a video game and you play that game for hours all day long? You just love this game. And then when you go to bed and you see yourself falling asleep, like as you maybe you wake up right before you actually fall asleep, or you're just kind of falling asleep and you're kind of in that zone in between falling asleep and being awake. And what's going through your head? That video game is replaying in your head over and over and over. And when you dream and you wake up, you're dreaming about the game. It's because your brain is replaying the same stimulus. It's replaying the same functions, the same stuff it went through during the day, and it's reinforcing it in your memory by going over and over and over again the same stuff. That's how it reinforces your memory. So the things you learn get synthesized, consolidated in your brain when you sleep at night. It makes connections, it unifies. It's like when you first learn something and it's in your short-term memory, it's like when you're making Jell-O. What do? You have water and you have powder. You put the powder in the water and you boil it. So you're working now. You got the short-term memory. You're now learning the phrases. The water's boiling. You know, you're dissolving the Jello packet, powder into the water, and it's boiling. And you're doing the short-term memory. You're learning it right now. And then you're done learning it, and you settle down. You take a break. The water cools, and the Jello starts to thicken a little bit. And then when you go to bed, when you go to sleep, it's like putting that in the fridge. It solidifies, and it becomes, like a solid gelatinous thing now. It's not a liquid anymore. When you sleep, that's what happens to your memories. They get solidified. It's the same thing. So it's really crucial, sleep. Now, how can we utilize our sleep to keep these things memorized? Well, the best thing to do is study in the evening before you go to sleep. A lot of people, they like to read before they go to bed. It helps you unwind. Well, the same thing goes with language learning. I like to listen to dialogues, and I like to read in my languages before you go to bed. Learn vocabulary before you go to bed. Because if you do it right before you go to bed, it'll better be solidified in your mind. Because you're most likely going to be replaying the stuff in your head that happened right before you went to sleep. And you're going to remember the stuff that happened right before you went to sleep. So that is quite important. Study your language learning time before you go to bed. It actually makes a big difference. Now, a lot of people, they have, constant problems with retaining their language. How do you keep this information in there? And the important thing is to constantly test yourself repeatedly. So, constantly review the stuff you've learned. Constantly go over it. What I like to do so I don't forget my German, and I keep it, is I constantly reread my old German notes that I have in my notebooks, when I was first learning. I reread that stuff. I reread old stories in German that I used to know. I go, oh, I forgot that word, and I go look it up. So you got to constantly be re-exposing yourself to the language to remember it. Don't let the exposure go away, or you will deteriorate in that language. Constantly test yourself. Constantly be exposing yourself to these languages. And it gets more difficult as time passes and you have more languages under your belt. I imagine people who know 10 plus languages have a hard time finding time to expose themselves to the languages they already know, because they know so many. You can only expose yourself to so many languages in a day, So, it's important. And you got to do it if you want to keep the information. You gotta test yourself, re-expose yourself to the language. Review what you went over. Constantly be reviewing stuff you just learned. So, I think those are probably the most important things when it comes to memory and language learning. I'm going to recap just real briefly for you so you can understand. So you want to get knowledge of your results when you're first learning. Go out there, get out there, speak this stuff, and get the feedback. Yes, you said it correctly. No, you didn't. So then you relearn it. Yes, you said it correctly. So you know you're doing it correctly, and that'll further solidify that memory. Know that you are doing it right. And recite what you're going over. Recap. Tell yourself what you're learning. Summarize what you just learned. Then you want to pick and choose the important things, the important words, the important phrases, and learn those first. You want to organize things into a similar theme chunk it up and learn it bit by bit. You want to overlearn things. Even though you feel like you've already mastered it, keep learning the same thing over and over, because it's better going to solidify it. And then when you're put on the spot and you're nervous, you can recall the stuff real easily. And do the spaced learning, the spaced practice. Study 20 minutes, do something else for 5 minutes, study 20 minutes, do something else for 5 minutes, study 20 minutes, do something else for 5 minutes. You know, change it up. Study your language, review a different language. Study your language, review a different language. That's what I do. You know, change it up, keep it interesting. You know, study before you go to sleep. And one more thing I forgot to mention, always make sure you got a full gut, full stomach. Because if you're hungry, you're not as likely to remember stuff. Or if you're thirsty, you're not as likely to remember things because you're focused on eating and drinking. So make sure your belly's full. Recap, review, go over things. All that is the most important stuff, you know, when it comes to remembering and retaining the stuff you're learning. So when you learn your language, you remember it. Now, the source material I learned is, or the source material that I used for this video is a book called Psychology Modules for Active Learning by Dennis Kuhn and John Mitterer. It's the 11th edition. It's a textbook I have for my Intro to Psychology class. So, when it comes to language learning, these things work. I implement this stuff. You know, these are widely accepted ideas in psychology. They're applicable to all aspects of your life, but especially language learning. Because what are we doing? We're learning, and you got to remember what you learn. How are you going to speak the language otherwise? So, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I know I sure learned a lot of stuff, you know, and this stuff's greatly helped me improve my language learning, and I hope it does the same for you. Peace out.